You've heard us use the term all of the above before, right? Whether it's commodities or weather, how about energy? All of the above when it comes to powering your car, powering your home, giving you AC in a ridiculously hot summer that has boiled up again. That's the topic today here on the M2M podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. We are going to be talking with the founder of Energy Security Partners. That's ESP.earth. Kerry Duggan is the subject today, and we are going to cover a whole lot of things when it comes to data centers, who's building them, what you should ask for if you are a community that has one of those big energy companies knocking on your door saying, hey, we'd like to use your town for a data center. She gives you the list of things to ask for if you are that community. But what happens if it's not a magic bullet or the technology is outdated? We're going to talk about slingshotting forward, but getting action done now. Kerry has spent time in the government. She's in the private sector, academic sector, data, heat, semi-congestion. We have so many things to cover in this discussion today. Let's just get to it right now. I'm Paul Yeager. This is the M2M podcast. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday. Now, let's get to our full discussion. Part of my other job is to cover women's basketball in the state of Iowa. I've been at I don't know, do you know anything, Kerry, about the game that Iowa used to play called 6-on-6 girls basketball?
I've never heard of that.
Oh my goodness. So up until 1993, 3 guards, 3 forwards on each end of the court, 2 dribbles, and that's all. But we had girls that scored 100 points a night. It was a lot of scoring, and every type of girl could play. Do you think you could play in a game where you only had 2 dribbles?
I'm a sharpshooter, so absolutely.
All right. Okay, let's keep going on that theme. Caitlin Clark's a big deal in Iowa. Where's your best shot at? Where can you Caitlin from?
I'm a hash mark shooter.
Nice.
So when I was playing college ball, sometimes coaches made me warm up from the hash mark. So predating Caitlin Clark, but I know that I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, she's done well for herself, and I covered her in high school, so I've seen her a long time. How'd you make the transition into your vocation from playing basketball?
It's funny you asked that because I'm actually writing my book, probably the only book I'll ever write, and I've been reflecting on that. And to me, it's just muscle memory. You know, basketball is about making decisions quickly. You don't have time to build a spreadsheet and figure things out. You just figure them out. And the term I use is, see the lane, take the lane. And so it's really muscle memory. I'm a little bit stubborn too. Like I really want to solve problems. I really like to win, and I'm competitive. So I just use all that to figure out, solutions for our planet.
Do you was that your undergrad?
My undergrad was environmental studies at University of Vermont. And then my graduate degree was natural resource policy and behavior at University of Michigan.
Okay, so the 2 areas, you spent time in New York and Vermont, and you're from Michigan, back in Michigan. How do the 2 regions view the environment as an
That's
overall?
A good question. So I live in Detroit on purpose and out loud, and I've been very blessed. I spent a decade in Washington, but I was sent back home by President Obama to work on some serious issues before the infamous bankruptcy. The street lights were out. There's a lot of issues, and I was on the federal team helping solve them. I bring that up because when I came back from Vermont, which is like the green promised land, I came back to Detroit after undergrad, and I'm like, okay, I have work to do. So it's been sort of in my heart, especially this place, because I think it's really important, obviously for the nation, but also it's important to my family. We're generations ago immigrants, and the city's been very good to my family, so I'm trying to be good back.
You mentioned Vermont. We've sent crews to Vermont over the years from market to market, and environment is always one of them. Of course, it's the industries of the state. There's always such a good know-how. Michigan Falls, though, also it's that transition from lots of entrepreneurs to the regions to your west and south that are much more commodity driven. In our world, we always kind of talk about commodities. Is there a different makeup in their agriculture and energy views that you have found in those 2 areas?
That's a good question. I think right now, the moment we're in, I find that the energy demand and what we're all going through and experiencing, data center build out, people are more alert, concerned about things like water and energy. Probably, it's like an inflection moment. So a lot of what I'm doing is trying to pivot away from fear and get people to focus on how to get solutions done in your community. So one thing I'm out talking about is leverage. These hyperscalers right now, and this is across the country because I've been doing cross-country travel on these topics, they're in a political crisis because they can't develop. And by the way, we're in a race against other countries to get compute, because that is the infrastructure of the future, much like the highways were. And so there's things I say like data centers are just a box with a brain in it. They used to be in the closet behind you at the office. But the demand for energy to build these out at the scale to compete for compute is what's causing problems. And they can't build when there's a moratorium. That means communities need to sit back, work together, work with your elected officials who in some cases are very scared right now to lose their job and lose their pension or their life because of the data center hysteria. But the communities do have leverage. And one of my colleagues at University of Michigan, Sarah Mills, put together a guidebook. It's specific to Michigan, but it's applicable anywhere. And the main thing is this: you can ask for things in order to accept them into your community. That's one thing. You can ask for a % of the developer's fee to buy down your tax. You can ask for solar and battery, which is really smart because the sun does not send you an invoice. It's cost effective. And if you pair that with battery, actually battery is the most important thing here. A lot of people are concerned about the noise with data centers. And if you put battery on, then you get silence. A couple other things, on the water, which is, a big concern around the country. I think about it like the radiator in your car. I don't have to go in and water it every year. It's a one-time draw. It maybe doesn't even have to be fresh water. It can be gray water. So there's lots of things folks can do. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this topic is it doesn't have to be ugly. At the end of the day, it's just infrastructure like your water tower that you drive by and you don't really pay attention to anymore. I was on a panel in Chicago about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman from NVIDIA whose thesis is this stuff should just fade into the background. And I think that should be the goal. But if it is, in your community, it doesn't have to be ugly. You can work with the artist community. There's a lot of leverage right now to do things right and to stabilize the grid, which I know a lot of people don't really understand. So you want me to take a minute and explain?
Well, you already kind of started to go in the direction I wanted to talk about, but can we back up for just a moment we'll get to regions, but tell me what the stress is right now. Is it only data center demand for energy, or are we in certain regions, Southeast, Southwest, Central, coasts, where energy demand, we all know what happened in Texas to that grid system and how it's different than anybody else. So we've been paying attention. Where's the biggest headline right now when it comes to energy stress on a grid?
I think it's the combination of the prevalence of data centers vampiring the grid, paired with extreme heat. That's been the story this summer, right? And you see what's going on with wildfires and everything else. So we're in this time where it's just, like I said, I think it's an inflection point. But the energy demand is there. Everyone comes home 6 o'clock and turns on their air conditioner. That stresses the grid. So I'm going to give you my favorite example of what this really looks like. And you're right, it is region by region, but everyone is kind of in this together. It was really hard to escape the heat this summer. But I describe it as this. So I'm a Detroiter driving down I-94 at 5 o'clock. It's hot out. I'm stressed. I'm tired. I'm angry. It's bumper to bumper traffic. And then a semi tries to merge and get through. That's called congestion. And that's what is happening on the grid right now with the energy demands as they are. The solution to that goes back to what I said before, which is batteries. If you put solar and battery on a data center, then what's happening is they can dispatch that at the peak hours of rush hour. And that semi can go down the freeway at 3 a.m. and nobody's there. Nobody's complaining. It just so that's how we stabilize a grid. And there's ways to do it that I think are actually terribly exciting right now. There's a term called distributed generation, which is basically like rooftops. You may have heard of net metering, where you can feed back into the grid and actually get paid. That's another way that we can stabilize a grid, because it takes a while to build big infrastructure, big energy infrastructure, whether it's nuclear or, wind, solar, hydro. I mean, if you can do distributed generation quickly, and keep in mind the cost curve has come down on these technologies. Solar is like 54 years old. It's not your grandma's solar
Hmm.
anymore. So making that affordable, and again, using this political situation the hyperscalers in is an opportunity to capture and stabilize not only your grid, but in places where, you're talking about different regions. If you look at Florida or California, let's go with Florida, for example. Sunshine's sake, they should have a lot of solar for their ACs. But when your house gets hit by a hurricane and power goes out, the grid goes down, the people with the solar and battery backup can still keep their medicine in their fridge. I'd love to see these things going on every nursing home in the country, to protect our loved ones. So that's kind of how I think about the grid. And, it does depend in terms of it impacts region to region, but, we're all in this boat together right now as a country.
Is the battery solution individual home by home, or is it a utility in a community solution that could be used?
All of the above.
Okay.
We need all hands on deck right now. Distributed generation is the way that we both secure ourselves and stay safe when there's a major disaster, and we have to do it at speed and scale to get ahead of this so that people can have their air conditioners on. It's not going to get suddenly cooler next summer. So the more rapid we can do this, and the more that folks get educated about clean energy. And I've had the great benefit of working at the U.S. Department of Energy, so I'm more intimate with these technologies. It's really exciting, especially stuff coming out of places like EERE or ARPA-E. Those are the tech offices at DOE they're fun to watch, in my opinion.
We've seen there's always a certain percentage that stays within Department of Energy, Department of Ag, Department of Commerce, from administration to administration. But then there's certain people that come in and it changes the direction or research ideas, and all of a sudden what you just did for the last 4 years is moot. How does the Department of Energy navigate changing political bosses for lifelong employees? I mean, you were inside DE. How do you do it?
Well, these are interesting times we live in, to say the least. A lot of folks who have exited the Department of Energy and other agencies have really come together as a community. In fact, I helped stand up the official bipartisan alumni group for DOE former employees, and it's been really remarkable to see just how people have really stuck together and made their technical expertise available. But as a rule, yes, there's career employees, everything from HR to, all around the seventh floor. But the political leadership, they get, to call the shots. But at the end of the day, I think most people forget Congress is the board that you're reporting to. So there's a lot of, navigation between the White House, Office of Management and Budget, agency leadership. But the Hill is still very important for telling the agencies what to do.
You mentioned it's not your grandma's solar energy, but the government has long been involved in alternative energy, whether it is supporting the windmills, the solar panels, the ethanol, the alternative forms. Current administration, not exactly a fan of government subsidies. Has that been more of a help or hurt to the alternative energy discussion?
Well, it's certainly a shock to the system, right? So we had the IRA, and then that got taken away. So there was a lot of enthusiasm about the opportunity there. But, fast forward, 7 months, 8 months, and guess what? Political crisis, extreme heat, people we have to solve. So I like to say, play to your strengths, or, see the lane, take the lane. That's what I'm doing right now, is I'm trying to educate folks to know what to ask for in this moment, regardless of what's happening in DC. There's still state and local governments. There could be state and local incentives people should look up. If you really want this stuff in your backyard, put your zip code into a search and find out where you can access best cost solar and battery. I think that industry is really going to start taking off, and it's a jobs play too. The amount of solar and battery we need is a skilled labor workforce, which is exciting.
And I think that's been part of the talking points for those to push back against the administration is the you have walked away from a lot of jobs in an era when you need all the jobs you can get. We're from the time that we record this to when this publishes, there's a jobs report always looked at by every administration, and so yes, that matters. Where are the best jobs, most long lasting jobs that come in the energy sector? Because go back to the data center and whether it is for Microsoft, Google, Facebook, yeah, there's these jobs that come in to build, but where are those jobs to keep going? So where are the long lasting jobs in this industry?
No, you're absolutely right. A data center, again, it's just a box with a brain in it. It's probably got a janitor and very few other people working in it. So the labor to build out these huge data centers is thing one. But thing two, and the most important thing in my view right now, is the skilled labor that needs to get trained and put out there to put distributed energy out. I think the utility business model is changing in real time because of these colliding situations we find ourselves in. So I hope utilities feel more incentivized as their demand increases with data center growth and air conditioning and so on, to really invest in the workforce and the communities. These jobs are everywhere. You can't, when there's something going on in the Middle East, if you have battery and solar, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about, if you're going to have what the price of gas is, right? So it's our safety, our security. It's hyper local, and these jobs stay local. You can't outsource, putting solar on your roof or ground mounting. And the other thing to say, because I've seen this up close and personal with a colleague here in town, these are not all high barrier jobs. They're very available, skilled labor jobs. We have the colleague I mentioned, she is training youth and the disabled community on how to do these deployments. So it's kind of open for everyone, and we just need to get ourselves more organized to do this work.
That's the job side. Let's go back to the batteries if we could. That is the technology side that frightens some people because of whatever makes up the battery. I'm trying to see if around my desk I even have a little one. How big of a battery are we talking that would be the best benefit for an individual home?
Well, a lot of people know the company Tesla. So Tesla has power packs for homes. I forget the name of it, the brand. But that's something you could look up. They're going to be different sizes depending on, where the deployment is. So it's not super huge for a home. And a lot of people already have generators. They're just generators that are using molecules, sometimes electrons. But there's novel technology coming forward too. Hydrogen powered batteries, for example, is something I'm seeing for generators. So there's lots of different kinds out there. I do expect we'll have increasing diversity in what composes a battery. I would love to say more about that some other time. But the technology's really changed. And I try to tell people, think about your TV screen in 1999. Now think about your TV screen now. Things have changed. Think about the refrigerator of the 1950s to what you have in your kitchen now. So I would encourage you to look at, our national laboratories and what they're doing. ARPA-E, ERA, DOE, folks, I think, are finally waking up to energy literacy being actually really important because they're getting ambushed every month from the utility bill. In a place like I live in Detroit, a lot of people's mortgage is the same price as their energy bill. So we call that an energy burden. So.
I think about, or I often say on this podcast, on the TV show, COVID accelerated a lot of things. Is the government pullback in investment accelerating this industry because there's so many players that are going, yes, we need to do solar and we're going to invest in it. Yes, we need batteries. We're going to invest in it. And it's already the private sector, not the government side of the ledger.
Yeah. And I can tell you, after I did my decade in Washington and I did my public service, I loved my job, but I love what I'm doing now because I get to see the solutions and help accelerate them around the country, which is really, really fun. And I think that's really what it's going to take is people to find the market opportunity to address extreme heat and data center demand. And it's, people are really scared right now. And as I said, I'm grateful for being on your show to teach people a little bit more on how to, well, not people so much, but developers of the data centers. Social license is their big problem. And the solution to that is actually working with the community, not, sneaking around and then surprise, we've got a data center.
Well, that's actually a topic we're working on for a story right now. Who is pro data center? Why?
Because okay, let's separate them out. I just gave you some examples of past technology and current technology. Data centers just used to be in, your office closet. They're not inherently bad. The way they've been built in the past is what I have an issue with. So it's kind of this, not that, and that's why I'm out talking to communities and electeds and economic development folks to know what to ask for at this moment. I sometimes give a speech where I tell people to open their phone and look up something called the Bullitt Center in Seattle. It is considered the world's greenest commercial building. That's what I would prefer a data center to look like. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to be ugly, and the community should be engaged. And I've been giving a lot of thought to, particularly young people and artists, participating to make sure that whatever comes to your town, it's beautiful, and it's just infrastructure, and that's how it ends up being. But the opportunity to unlock the rooftops, I think, is the thing right now. And yeah, it's a moment. I also think this is our inflection point as a country. You remember how we went to the moon? We didn't
Hmm.
use old technology. We had to develop the stuff to get us to the moon. And I think this is my generation's moonshot to get something right. Stabilize the grid, make sure people are safe in their homes, make sure the ACs work. And, AC technology is also changing. I've seen some really novel technology out there. So I think we're at a moment where we can look back on this and we either decided to do things right and engaged with the community, or it's going to look a lot the same and you're going to expect blackouts. There's some communities that are, even the federal government, like breaking the glass right now and sounding the alarm, but that's not a strategy. You know, reacting to the emergency is important, but that's not your strategy moving forward.
Well, I was going to ask about time, so I guess I will. What is a timeline that we need to act? I mean, if there is already a glass being broken to sound the alarm, how quickly does that need to be answered, and how realistic is it to get to that timetable you're about to lay out?
Well, this there is already deployment, distributed generation in some communities, but I'd say yesterday the urgency is here and now because people are experiencing blackouts and it's unsafe, and people will die when there's a blackout and they can't access their medicine or whatever. So the urgency is now. It's a great idea for folks to communicate with their local elected officials to start having these conversations about how to bring forward this technology. And if you're lucky, get the hyperscalers to pay for it. We didn't talk about cost, but the cost curve has gone down. These technologies are more affordable. But at this political moment, I think the hyperscalers need to participate with community to get what they want and what they need. And as a nation, we want to win this. We actually should be paying attention to the infrastructure of the future. People didn't probably like highways back in the day, or the horse and buggy community didn't really like the car back in the day. But I'm not even going to talk about a Model T. That's the old way. I have a Mach E, all electric. So I just want people to kind of reframe this in their head and address their concerns, bringing a solution to the problem. And I've been out talking about this, and I often say the solution is inside the problem if we take a beat and think about it.
Let's go back to something from earlier. You mentioned about land use. I know
Mm-hmm.
specifically in Michigan, there has been pushback over solar panels, and that has spread to many other states where they're like, I don't want good farmland to now have solar panels on it. It's much better used for a farm. How do
Yeah.
you feel that debate needs to go of who should have solar, who shouldn't have solar when it comes to a farm field?
Um, yeah, I've seen some interesting examples around the country. Iowa, you guys have a ton of wind power,
We do.
and that's very different aesthetically from solar. The other thing is it doesn't have to be rooftop; it can be ground mount. So there are a variety of things, and there's new technology that I can't talk about that coming online. New ways of doing things. As far as land, I don't like the idea of putting more pressure on farm owners and putting a data center in a farm community. I've seen them, the loud and noisy ones. It's not great, but there's an opportunity to do them cleanly and power them, correctly. I do this funny story. I think about when my mom used to take us to her best friend's house to go swimming during the summer. We would never go empty-handed, and so communities should be asking three things at a minimum, maybe four: BYO, power, batteries, and water. And until those things are solved, we actually have the negotiation upper hand, which is ironic because we're talking about $1 trillion industry that we're trying to negotiate with. So it's, like I said, it's an inflection point right now. We got to get it right, and we got to do it at speed and scale.
But I think of towns that are 10,000, 20,000. They are trying to stand up against a big somebody that's in the NASDAQ. They don't feel that they have much power to push back and ask for those things. But you're saying they have that opportunity. There is some leverage that could be had, but you just need to know what to ask for.
100%. And so I point you back to the guidebook that Sarah Mills put out at the University of Michigan. It's the Graham Institute. It's a guidebook that's completely transferable from community to community. The basics are power, battery, and water. And I encourage people to also make the ask for a percent of the developer's fee if possible, because that will help your tax base in these small communities.
What happens
Also,
though
one other
if
thing I wanted to say
okay.
in Michigan, we've had for a couple of years this conversation about reindustrialization. I live in Detroit, not far from the water, where our industrial history, was born. So I much prefer to see a data center go into a brownfield than a greenfield. And so that's also something I would push communities to think about. Look at places that are already zoned or where you used to have manufacturing or something, and be a good neighbor when you go back to that area. Because a lot of the communities that have been highly impacted by industry are often communities of color. So definitely, if you're going to go there, you have to be a good neighbor and do things right. I think, again, this is a turning point, I think, if we get smart.
And you're talking areas, I mean, you can use Detroit as an example, but any of the industrial bases of the upper Midwest, the Rust Belt, there's a lot of areas that don't have factories that are operational now that could be used for, I think, what it is that you're talking about. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I kind of think that every community is going to get a data center because it's just infrastructure. So using this moment right now to figure out siting, and get the community engaged around siting. One of the beautiful things about where I live is community engagement is like a very necessary process here, or you get pushback big time, or you get a moratorium slapped in your face. So the community engagement, forcing these companies to earn the social license to be your neighbor, that is the leverage point that I was talking about.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, you gotta. They might build it and be gone, but you're saying keep them in and being a neighbor. Don't just build it into part.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly. I
Okay.
mean, the jobs aren't going to stay, but as I said, if we focus on distributed generation and forcing these companies to be better actors, then everybody wins. And that's the future I'm working for.
You mentioned the progress that our TV made in 20
Mm.
years. There's a phrase that one of my colleagues likes to use sometimes for a data center, is he calls them a brown banana. The minute you turn that thing on, it's already outdated. How
Mm.
quickly should something last before you have to redo that data center to make it profitable and efficient as possible? And who should pay that bill?
Yeah, I think the demand for these things is the hyperscalers' problem. So yeah, they lose hundreds of millions of dollars every month when they can't develop a new site. So they're, I would say, highly motivated to do things the right way because of all the pushback. I think it's almost come as a surprise because data centers have been around forever, right? They just haven't been built the right way. So I like to think about phrases like leapfrog or slingshot. We should go from worst case, which is what have been living with, to world class in our communities. So it's beautiful. They buy their own power or they bring their own power. They do one-time water withdrawal, ideally not with fresh water, and they use storage to stabilize the grid so we don't have these rolling blackouts that people are experiencing.
You mentioned water. That's where I wanted to go next. I'm guessing with the slingshot technology that you're referring to, we become more efficient and don't need as much water. However, the here and now, that is a huge concern. Let's look at Nebraska. Let's look at Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, where it is dry. Using water for a data center doesn't sound like it would sell very well.
Right, and that's where you got to bring forward the demand for doing things the correct way. So I use the example of the radiator in your car. I mean, that's not a new technology, but that could be, that type of application could be used. There's a variety of new technologies and companies out there who want to be part of the solution. This is a huge market opportunity for anybody who's on the solution side to help us get this sort of bouquet of clean tech and, community engagement. And the other thing I think about the farmers, they have to report what they're doing with respect to the community's aquifer watershed.
Mm-hmm.
We should be asking the same of the developers and data centers because we can't measure what we don't know. So again, communities should get smart. And the other thing I wanted to point out, insurance, a lot more people are thinking about that. They're thinking about their utility bill and their insurance bill because of all these impacts by region. If you look at the cost of insurance in Florida or California, things are changing because of, increased wildfires and hurricanes and the like. So all of these problems coming at one time, have borne an opportunity, I think. The phrase necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's where we're at right now. We need to do things differently.
What if this is an old economic development discussion? What if community A goes down your checklist of what they need to ask for, and the hydro, and the hyper builder says, nah, we'll go to community B, and community B doesn't ask for it, but community B is right next to community A, therefore the region doesn't win?
Yeah, you're exactly right, which is why it's important that you're doing this podcast and giving me a chance to tell people how to ask for what they deserve. Yes, the hyperscalers are motivated to go to the path of least resistance,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the noise out there is so loud that as soon as we get communities smart on this stuff, they're gonna know what that leverage point is.
But aren't you a little concerned though that there's going to be some communities that they've already signed because they were so anxious and they got taken to the bank? To the cleaners.
It's a bummer. I'd love to beat them to the punch, but some of these moratoriums actually give you that time to stop and think. So that's what I'm looking at now is like, who's got a moratorium? Okay, how can I get in trusted messengers from your community who understand this very unique generational opportunity to make the pivot, to use another basketball term?
Well, and I was going to ask you, go back to the beginning about the regional question that I asked you, Vermont versus Michigan. Let's go back. Let's finish up with this about areas. It sounds like we don't necessarily need to do something in a farm field, but a brown field. The bigger city is going to be identified first as a place where a data center, a battery facility, whatever it's going to be. It's not going to necessarily be in rural areas as much as it is metro areas. Is that right?
I think they're going to be everywhere, if I'm being honest. And maybe they're not all the same size when you go to a city versus an old industrial site. And ideally, unless they're clean, I wouldn't put them in farmland. So, power, battery, water, let's get it.
All right, Kerry. Last thing. Best two things I need to watch here in the next 6 months on this topic.
Watching people stop with moratoriums and make the demands. Keyword leverage. So I would look for communities who actually are successful at negotiating with a $1 trillion industry to help their community tax base. So that is my wish and my hope and what I'm working on.
All right, Kerry, be careful on that hash. Don't get too hot with your shots. Coach will leave you in the whole game.
I'm very retired now. It's all good.
All right. Thanks, Kerry.
Good to see you.
We are produced at Iowa PBS. Our production supervisor is Sean Ingracia. His crew is Reed Denker, Kevin Rivers, Julie Knutson, Neil Kyer, and David Feingold. The executive producer of Market to Market is David Miller. I'm Paul Yeager. We'll see you next time.